I just got a smile on my face from what I just read. Now, I will make sure to have non-spoilers for the first part of this, and it's only like 90 pages or something. I have it on my Kindle, and I would say that once we get to the spoiler section, make sure to go read it, come back, or if you don't care, I'm not going to do any major things about the plot. I'll mainly just be talking about this main guy named Reese. So I didn't totally expect what I was going to read. I don't know what I was expecting, but I know I love Korbal Broach and Bauchelain from Memories of Ice. In fact, they were my number one. I was just so excited about them, and I wanted more. And when I found out they had their own thing, I was so excited. And I'm also I've been putting together my own thing and writing my own thing. And as I was reading Memories of Ice, there's a moment where Bauchelain is having in the midst of this major event, and I don't want to spoil that, but if you know, you know. And he kind of has this drink of wine with someone, and he's very put together, but you can tell that there's this sinister element of him. And while all this is going on, his hands probably aren't even shaking. And I was just so intrigued by this character. Every once in a while you get a great villain. I mean, a villain, but like just just such a great character. And so I took that, and I had to really rethink my villain that I had in mind, because mine was very much more on the Korbal Broach end of things, where it was like, well, that's clearly the psycho over there. But not even that. There's just something even more frightening and compelling about Bauchelain. Now, I didn't know what we were going to get into, but I read Blood Follows, and it turned out to be a Sherlock Holmes sort of satire from the perspective of a manservant who works for if Sherlock Holmes and Watson were like two necromancer psychos. So it's told from the perspective of the guy who works for the likely prime suspects whenever anything terrible is going on. And now the plot for this first one didn't blow me away, but I was on board the whole way. You know what I mean? It definitely was a great start to what might come in the future. Now, I laughed hard a couple times. There was a couple times where I actually laughed out loud at what I was seeing, and I'm gonna have my eye on these books. I can't wait to read the rest of them. And I don't mean to diverge again, but for the last couple years, I've had all these different stories that I've wanted to tell. And they are kind of more in a grim gothic sort of setting, but in an absurdist sort of way. So I was so glad to see some absurd, morbid humor in sort of a fantasy sort of, not so much gothic, but it has, kind of a cousin. And I thought, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? And I've been putting together all these different stories that sometimes it's like heartfelt, but sometimes it's just absurd. And I've had a hard time really weaving it together, even though I've built this big world. And the hardest thing to do for me has been, how do I pace all these different stories that are very different in some ways, and kind of web them together? And I'm just an amateur at this, but maybe this novella format is the way for me to go. Maybe. Where they all kind of land in the same world and tell the story of the world, but there might be a way of me not relying on them like converging at the end with this big major event, but kind of I don't know. So I'm gonna be looking at that now. I already loved uh, Emancipor Reese, no, Korbal Broach and Bauchelain from Memories of Ice. But holy smokes, do I love Emancipor Reese. This really is told from Emancipor Reese's eyes. And I'm not going to go through spoilers of the main plot, but I do want to talk about Emancipor Reese and how he gets this job. So if you don't want to see anything, come back later. But if not, I'm just going to talk about that first element at the start of this book. Now, it starts off where he doesn't have a job. And he has this thing about him where he can't keep a job for the life of him, not because he's a crappy worker, but because his employers keep dying. I thought that's kind of funny, and his friends just kind of mess with him, and he keeps having to go home and tell his wife that he's lost his job, but in part because another person's been murdered, or he's been on a ship and then they all went down except for him, and everyone died. His whole resume is people dying. He doesn't have any references, and and he just has such a down on his luck every man sort of feel to this guy, where he's like, well, I need to bring home money to my wife, who really doesn't respect me, my kids, who probably aren't even mine because I was always away, and who knows, and I'll just do whatever. And I laughed pretty hard when I found out that this guy gets a job working for necromancers essentially because of a flyer on a pole. This flyer that is enchanted, that no one's supposed to touch, or else it'll kind of mess with them, or whatever. So no one wants to touch it. He's drunk. He gets the job, and now you wonder, like, is this curse that he has going to extend to his new employers? And I just think that's an amazing. It couldn't have been a more, like, I wish I would have thought of that. It's such a funny, just silly, easy way of having a guy get a job to two psychos is just a flyer for a manservant. And like, in my mind, I would have constructed this big elaborate thing where whatever. But it's just funny. He just gets the job. And I do want to talk a little bit about things that are a little bit further in with once he gets the job. But again, it won't be the main plot, but just a couple things that I think are funny, because he's like in every comedy routine, or in a lot of comedy routines, you have like the really oddball sort of character, or then you have the everyman sort of character, like the straight man, who kind of reacts, and we are responding through Reese, who's going in and he's getting disgusted by things, and he's just kind of horrified, but he needs a job. And I wonder, like, what's he going to do if he wants to quit? Like, what's he going to tell his wife? She's going to say, no way. Like, finally you have a employer who isn't dying. You are keeping that job. It's well paying. You are keeping it. And I just can't wait to go on this little journey with them. There is one thing that I thought was great in one of the conversations just early on with Bauchelain and Reese, where Bauchelain says that Reese's death has been, he's foreseen his death, and that he will die laughing. And I am so hoping that this is Steven Erikson really calling his shot about that moment and already having something up his sleeve, because just with the tone of things so far, I mean, he's got to die in some silly, absurd way. And if he's dying laughing, that means that I'm going to be laughing too. And I have just loved the different moments in this book. I mean, weren't a lot of books, but just the tone was exactly right, exactly what I was looking for. Even if the plot really like wasn't totally there for me, for at least at the end, like I was getting near the end and thinking, uh, how are they gonna wrap this up in a way that's satisfying, right? But it's a novella, and I'm if this was like the only novella in this series, you it wouldn't be great. But since it just sets up the next ones, I think you just give it a pass that way. So I really enjoyed it, and hope more people read it. It doesn't look like there's. It looks like it's not overly, not as many people read that. I don't think as certainly not Book of the Fallen, and probably not the the books of the Malazan, whatever it's called. So I really enjoyed it though, and I am going to really be looking at it more for my own entertainment, but also really because maybe this is a different way that I could also express some of these stupid stories that I have, and not worry about making this grand epic or something like that. So anyway, I'll talk to you later.